Hello and welcome to Independent Podcast Service. I'm Paul.
I'm Dave.
And this week we are discussing the episode of Kolchak, the Night Stalker, entitled Bad Medicine. This episode originally aired November 29th, 1974, and there's a special guest star this time, Dave. It's Richard Keel, also known as Jaws, and I'm probably pronouncing that name wrong. But it's Jaws, and Jaws is good.
Very much so.
So let us move on to the important things. So let us start off with the number one film in America this week.
And around in the 70s, around that time.
It's a movie that we've already talked about.
From last week, or in other sort of contexts?
Yes, it is still The Trial of Billy Jack. Although it will soon be replaced by much better films.
Understandable.
Like for our next episode, it will be replaced by a better film. Anyway, moving on to the number one song in America this week, Dave. We're getting to the end of 74. What could it be?
Again, not too much within the musical knowledge of things.
It is a song called I Can Help by Billy Swan. I'm not familiar with this Billy Swan person.
Most likely was around. Again, nothing is clicking in the brain.
It's a country singer-songwriter best known for that single and apparently not much else.
Yeah, kind of a thing that happens in some cases.
Okay, did like 6 albums. None of them charted. Well, the first one charted well on the country charts, but had like a bunch of singles. Again, nothing like that would come close to the number one position again.
Yeah.
So the next year, his best single was 53rd. But I mean, looks like dude had like a half decent career, so good on him.
Stands, especially with how things were sounding from there. Definitely better than would have ending up as a one-hit wonder.
I mean, I would say he's a one-hit wonder, but at least like he had like a career. Like he had like 6 albums. But really, everybody would know the one song, and that's about it.
Yeah.
All right. So let us get into the episode. So, members of Chicago's social elite are turning up dead and their jewelry stolen, and the only clue is blackbird feathers. Kolchak learns that the killer is a shape-shifting Native American sorcerer who, under a centuries-old curse for trying to steal a sacred treasure, must gather precious stones. Kolchak almost becomes a victim until he tricks the shapeshifter into looking at his own reflection. The supernatural being dissolves into ashes/nothing at the sight of his own moral ugliness. So what did you think of this episode, Dave? Because this is a little bit different than what we've kind of got in previous episodes. Like for a monster.
Yeah, a teeny bit. Again, it was a little bit of time appropriation of things, because the couple things that were mentioned with this kind of balanced on, for the time, probably would have been somewhat informational, but definitely kind of a case of, ooh, they're trampling a lot on these sort of particular things. Ooh.
Oh yeah, there's definitely some things where you go like, oh, you can't say that. Like, oh, I know this is the 70s, but like, come on, guys.
Yeah, it's a little touchy. But it's also one of the interesting cases of the episode. It has a lot of really funny moments within it. Still with its main cast of the newsroom, Kolchak, the boss, and a couple other coworkers they work with. I can't remember specific names, but especially with our newest member, the older lady that came back in, she is hysterical with her additional commentary and assisting Kolchak with his foray into investigating.
Yes, so you're referring to Miss Emily, and she is great. I do love when like Carl storms out of the office saying he's going to buy new clothes, and she's just like, finally.
I kind of had to roll it back once or twice, be like, wait, what did she just shout as he left? It's like, finally! And I had a good chuckle after that.
Yeah, she's great, and I also love how like when Carl calls in, she like goes along with his like schemes and stuff.
Oh, and definitely, especially with how bad it kind of turned out with this. Don't ask him questions or I'll push the subject. It's like, oh. And him having to use two payphones to balance it out.
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of funny moments in this, and like I said, I think the monster that we get is interesting in this. I think it's a pretty fun episode overall.
I'd say so. It again, I was a little worried with how they were gonna go about how things were gonna go with it, but it still went into a little bit of historical information with the Native Americans that they were touching on in those cases there, as well as uh, location, how he specifically dealt with the monster, his plan, how that backfired, and how he got himself out of it. It was definitely good, especially with the location of the episode. Um, Again, it probably wasn't anything super interesting, but especially with a construction site zone that isn't completely closed up, but is opened up to the street lights to let some of the additional light in, add a little bit of atmosphere to it while he was exploring around.
Yeah, it's I do appreciate that. Like again, this is 74, so there are some things where with a modern eye we're kind of like, oh boy, but there is like this effort, it seems, to like actually impart like some level of, it feels like they're trying to actually get the Native American stuff right. Like they're not
Mm-hmm.
just making stuff. Like I'm like, okay, I think that this might actually be like a real legend. I don't actually know, but I'm like, it feels like they've actually researched this and took a little bit of care with it,
Mm-hmm.
which is nice to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So it is actually like a real legend. Um. Yeah. So it looks like basically they got the like the basis of the legend is correct, just from a quick Google search. Yeah, and I enjoy, like I said, I enjoy the monster. I think it's a fun, it's doing something different because we've mostly had like werewolves and vampires and that kind of stuff, and here we're doing something that, especially for the time, wouldn't have been something that anybody would really know about.
Definitely true. I think the only one other thing I sort of thought about was the supposed issues they might have had with working with the additional animals they had on set, which, on whole, with the uh, I think it was mostly just the jackal and crow that they were mentioning. It could transform into. I thought it was three, but that may have just been with uh, remembering certain things wrong. But I know with particular crows or ravens, they're fairly smart and can be decently trained. Though with especially jackals, it can kind of be like, ugh, how much trouble did that cause on set?
Yeah, so they mentioned that it can he can turn into a crow, a coyote, and then there was a third one, but we never actually see it. I don't think.
Hmm.
Yeah, I forget what it was, but she did like the lady who he goes to see, the lady who's like a researcher into like Native American history does mention a third one, but I don't remember what it was.
Ah, see, that might have been it.
Yeah. Alrighty. So if there's nothing else about this episode, next week we'll be discussing a little episode called "The Spanish Moss Murders."
Mm.
Okay. So, um, oh boy. Okay. So I'm just going to read this from Wikipedia and then you can react to it. A dreaming host who is part of a sleep study project conjures up the Creole legend of, and forgive me, my French is terrible, Père Malfait, who's played also by Richard Keel because they had him for 2 weeks, so they're like, we're getting 2 episodes out of this motherfucker. Willing to kill anyone who threatens its survival.
Hmm.
So again, we're doing something a little different. We're doing like a Creole legend, which I'm a fan of because I do like seeing these different like legends kind of brought to screen and stuff. But Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting episode.
Definitely. I'm kind of wondering with the subject matter and with the idea of how it will supposedly work. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see at the very least.
Yes, yes, it will. So, if there's nothing else, I've been Paul.
And I've been Dave.